right, who wants to come with me in the next group?
That's an awesome thing. Branches are really cool too.
We came out here to the Wilson Creek Forest today. There was about 20 to 25 people coming out on our forest loop walk in the Wilson Creek Forest, which is part of the greater Wilson Creek watershed, which has been heavily logged out over the last 10 years or so by Western Forest Products and C&I. And now this is a seashell community forest block. And it's an island. It's really an ecological island amongst the clear cuts that are on the lower Elphinstone slopes. So when people come out here and do these walks, they're, take in the forest, breathe in the fresh air, see the diversity of all the different trees and plant species. Most people walk away going, how could they possibly log this?
So we'll probably into this cycle right here. Now this is what they want to turn it into. Basically, if you imagine a living family, it's like taking out all the adults and permanently keeping them out. Like that's what you're talking about, the forest practices right now. They remove the old forest and they never allow it to be mature again, basically.
Because once you log an old growth forest, you don't replace it. It gets converted into a tree farm, and then it's just a rotation of cuts, 60 to 80 years. And on this particular section of the Sunshine Coast, we've only got 3% of the land base protected, so we need to bring it up to the 12% target across the province, which the province has.
The current forest practice never allows the forest to become mature again. All right, so let's walk on.
Okay. So this Wilson Creek Forest is unique in so many ways. It's got its habitat for bear, deer, cougar, a whole series of amphibians. And then it's, in an old growth forest, of course, you have all the representation of all the different tree species, including endangered trees such as the white pine.
I'm standing next to a western white pine. It's a particularly nice example. You can see a clear trunk soaring up like a column. It's got nice straight grain, but unfortunately, the western white pine was one of the first victims of human-introduced disease. In the early 1900s, pine blister rust was introduced. I think it was from Europe, and it killed about 90% of all the western white pine. They've never recovered fully. There's a few survivors, and this is one of them.
We're standing in a wet zone here where there's about 20 Sitka spruce trees, and the proposed logging road would go pretty much right down it. There's some of the veteran Douglas fir are set aside not to be cut, but it's been proven that over time the tops break off from the high winds, and then the needles dry out. The tree eventually will blow down over time. We've got evidence of that up here in some of the cut blocks that they've left the white pine behind. They've fallen down.
These standing dead trees are known as snags, and they're extremely important as wildlife habitat. There's a number of species of birds, woodpeckers first, and there's about 5 species of woodpecker in this area. And the most easy to identify of these holes is the square holes, which are done by a pileated woodpecker. And the round holes may be done by other species of woodpecker. After a woodpecker is finished, there are many other species of birds, like chickadees and nuthatches, who will use these holes to nest in. When you get the larger holes, like up near the top, raccoons and other larger animals, and a really big one, even bears, will sometimes build their home or have their cubs in large snags like this, quite a distance up the tree.
These snags are dead standing trees. They contribute to the next layer of organic material. This will eventually break down and form soil. But interestingly, the last time we were in here, previous times this was all kind of intact. And then the last time, it all had broken apart. And it wasn't just natural, decaying. So we realized, like, look at this. This is where ants live, right? What animal likes to eat ants? Do the kids know?
Yeah.
What?
I know. What?
It's a big, big animal.
A bird.
No, he's got 4 legs. He's got fur.
An anteater. An anteater. Aardvark.
An aardvark. Yeah, probably in other parts of the world.
Anteater too. It has a long
Because it spells
tooth.
B-E-A-R.
I saw another animal that eats.
So-
It has a long tooth.
Yeah, anteaters. So this would have been a bear ripping apart this stump, looking for insects.
Slurping them up.
Yeah. So the point, is that actually these old standing trees are a food source for large mammals.
The snag also loses bark continuously, and this bark around the bottom where that falls is the finest habitat for amphibians. There are at least 5 species of amphibians in this forest, 5 species of salamander, plus at least 3 species of frog. So that's 8 species altogether of amphibians. And this is their favorite type of area to nest in, where bark has fallen from dead trees like this. When they log, unfortunately, they always knock these trees down because they consider them dangerous. If they stayed far enough away from them, obviously they wouldn't be dangerous. But even if they left them, once it's in a clear cut, these species will not use them. They will not nest in a clear cut. So these old snags are very important. And of course, once they clear cut, they will never again have these big old snags because they never let the forest grow that big again. So they're a very important part. They're totally lost by industrial logging and clear cutting.
And then this one is just showing, this is another type of future soil producer, but it's a nurse log. This is great starting material for seedlings. This one,
I already
further
see
down
some
there, there's
now.
probably some seedlings.
I found a seedling in it. A seedling.
A seedling? Oh yeah, there's huckleberry.
This is a star called, the common name is a star flower. And soon it'll send out a nice shoot. Well, it's a very thin shoot. You can see it coming there already. And then it'll have one flower right on top here, sitting in the middle of the air, basically. That's why they call it the star flower, I guess. To make this trail, this forest, into a self-guided tour with a bit of information. We've got 28 of these signs, and we call them biodiversity stops because that's what this forest represents. It still represents a intact, rich in biodiversity ecosystem. That's the point that we want to make. And so people can go on their own or bring friends and relatives with them and go for a self-guided tour with a bit of information provided.
So the First Nations people would usually make a cut about here and then peel back the cedar bark as far as it could go. And cedar was one of their main, materials. So this would be saved because it's considered an archaeological site. But standing out on its own in a clear cut, it might not take long for it to be blown down. So you'll see this quite often through this block, where actually a lot of the tall old Douglas firs have this orange spray paint.
Like the one
So-
behind?
What's that?
Like the one behind?
Yes, there's one on that curved tree there. So that's going to be protected, but there's good evidence in other cut blocks that the remaining trees that are left behind maybe last for 5 years or so before they're blown down.
The reason we came out here today and invited members of the local community to come with us was to show them what this natural forest looks like and how little of it there is left. Then our great-grandchildren are never going to see it. We find that, unfortunately, many residents of the Sunshine Coast are not aware of how close they live to threatened ecosystems like the natural forest.
We moved here 2 weeks ago from Burlington, Ontario. Fairly from Toronto, where this guy's from, all the way to Hamilton. It's all wall-to-wall people. And we came to get away into the nice sunshine and trees and fresh air especially.
Yeah, the air here is
The air
just
is
so nice
amazing,
compared to living in
amazing.
southern Ontario.
And if you've got these trees, you really need these trees for that.
I'm in the forest because I absolutely enjoy it when I'm hiking in the forest, and I believe it's something that should be protected. So I want to meet like-minded people and see if I can help them out and join, be involved. Because there's just so little left, and I get such enjoyment of being in it.
A natural forest is it's like an organism that's evolved as an integrated unit. And what's happened over the last 100 years is most of that forest has been destroyed by clear-cut logging.
This forest has zero value to the timber industry until it's logged and trucked away. But, you know, we're taking a different position. There's inherent value in this forest, and actually now there's some scientific research showing that out of forest per hectare, there's $7,000 to $9,000 worth of ongoing environmental services.
Most people don't realize that there's only very little of it left. And this forest here is one of the few areas, it's about 100 acres large, and as Rick mentioned before, that's about the minimum size to maintain a natural ecosystem. So if we don't protect it now, it's gone. So this is our last chance to protect something this close, like 5 minutes away from the residential area.
It definitely needs to be protected. I mean, if they come in and clear log this, that's
Especially when you hear the return, they get like $25,000 for destroying, you know, like 100 hectares or something. Like it's
town,
such a
the city.
short-term thinking to destroy something. It'll take, if it ever does come back, it'll take hundreds of years. And it probably won't come back if you clear cut it. None of the forest floor plants come back. They just get withered by the sun and the increased heat.
This cut block is managed by the community forest, which is owned by the district of Sechelt. So when you look at the financial statements of the community forest, they give a return dividend to the city of Sechelt of $25,000. This cut block is been pulled back, so it's a little bit smaller than what they originally had determined. So we estimate the district of Sechelt on this cut block could make about a return dividend of $15,000 to $20,000. So we would like the district, the council, to consider a long-term approach to the value of this forest through tourism and all the environmental services that an old-growth forest provides. So some of those services include, you know, habitat. It's a buffer between the community and the mountains, and so the wildlife travels through here. If this buffer is removed, you're going to see more wildlife being impacted lower down. And then the long-term tourism, you can imagine, it doesn't take much to imagine a beautiful trail through here, and we could promote it as an old-growth forest big tree tour to Vancouver. That's going to attract more tourist dollars to the coast, and that's an ongoing economic driver instead of a one-time cut, which only a handful of contractors receive the money for that. You can't control where they spend their money, where they take their vacations, but if you keep the forest intact, that is an asset that remains in the community.
The lower mainland apparently is doing a better job of protecting its very little remaining virgin forest compared to the Sunshine Coast. It seems there's very little effort here to preserve what little they have left. It's very sad.
A forest that's every bit as beautiful as Stanley Park, and as close to where people live as Stanley Park is. People from the lower mainland are driving by here every weekend. This should be considered as part of the protected area for the lower mainland.